Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to our coffee break seminar. My name is Lauren Ernie Flessner. I work in the Office of Research Facilitation and Dissemination, and thank you for joining us for our coffee break about post-award responsibilities. We will get started in just a moment, but I wanted to let you know first that our next coffee break is going to be on Thursday, April 11th from 3 to 4 o'clock p.m. And that is going to be on updates on MSU's Human Research Protection Program and IRB requirements. So I'd like to introduce our speakers. Today we are being joined by Stacy Salisbury and Meghan Cartwright from Contracts and Grants. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. All right, we'll get started. I'm Stacy Salisbury and Meghan Cartwright's with me. We're from Contract and Grant Administration, which is the post-award office for sponsored programs. Both Meghan and myself are in the awards group. We set up the RC and RG accounts, maintain those, and we do effort reporting. We set up effort, and then we also will check that throughout the life of the project and at certification to see if there is anything that needs to be followed up on. We also have in the audience Amanda Blank from Office of Sponsored Programs. So that way we also have pre-award representation. So hopefully we don't get stumped with pre-award questions since Meghan and I are mainly post-award. All right, the topics that we'll cover today are effort reporting. We want to look at what effort reports look like, why they're a requirement, and what happens during the certification period. And also we will talk about matching, also known as cost share, the types of match, and how we track it at MSU. I am going to switch it over to Meghan right now, and then I will be back later to talk about terms and conditions after she talks about effort reporting.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay if I talk at this level? Yeah. I wanted to just start by seeing if there were any questions that you had that you wanted to go over today, or things that you wanted to make sure that we discussed. Nothing major out there? What's that?
I said they'll come up.
Okay, good. And yes, please feel free to stop us anytime if you have a question or something doesn't make sense to you, just let us know. So how many of you are effort administrators? 2. And then how many of you have an effort report that you certify? What are the other people out in the crowd? Since there's so many of us, I just thought we'd discuss real quick. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, good. Yeah.
Folks have questions, we'll have to either use a mic or you might repeat.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So yeah, we have a few effort administrators out here, and then it looks like some people who are just here learning about effort. It's a really fun topic, so that's good. So first, what is effort reporting is what we wanted to go over. So our effort reports are receipts that auditors use to document the amount of effort performed on a restricted grant. So individuals who have salary on your federal or state of Michigan accounts, or who have committed cost share, are going to have an effort report. So anyone who's paid on an RC account that is federal or state of Michigan will auto-generate an effort report. Also, if someone has committed to have effort on an account, we'll set up that effort and that will generate an effort report for them. We also use our effort reports to document the cost share. So we populate the percentages of effort based off of the budget justification that is submitted to the agency. So if your PI says, I'm going to work 3 months of the year on this account, then we'll use that. If they say I'm going to charge 10% of my salary, then we'll use that. And we enter this when the award is set up at the post-award stage. So when it comes to awards group and we set it up in Account Explorer, we'll enter the amount of effort there. You'll get an email about this, and if it's ever incorrect, you can just contact us back and let us know, hey, they should really be set up for this. But I also wanted to show you that it can be seen during the life of the project. If you're familiar with Account Explorer, which how many of you are familiar with Account Explorer? Almost everyone in the room, so that's good. So you can go to your account in Account Explorer, and down here, there's this effort tab. And if you click on that, that will show you who is set up for what time period, and then how much they're set up for. When you see these things that say total or PI key person, that means that it's committed effort. So your PI has said, I'm gonna work this much on the account. If it doesn't have anything after it, then that is gonna be cost share. So that means the matching that you've committed to the agency is gonna be right there. The way that the effort report works is we track our federal and state projects individually on the top of the report, and then the remainder is going to be lumped down together on the bottom of the report. So all of these are your other sponsored or non-sponsored activities. This is going to be your general fund accounts, your unrestricted RC accounts, your RG accounts, and when you report your effort percentage, you're going to lump all those totals together because we don't need to track that. The report does need to total 100%. So in this case, you can see this person worked 95% on this account, but they're paid 8% here, but you can't certify 103%. So you just do 5%, and it's okay that this bottom part doesn't equal what this pay is because we don't have to track that. If you are going to certify 100% on a sponsored account, which would mean any of these accounts up here, if there are a couple accounts and they all totaled 100%, that means that you're not spending time writing proposals, serving on departmental committees, you're not spending time teaching. That means that really 100% of your time at MSU has been spent working on these sponsored accounts. So where to find our effort reports? How many people know where the portal is on CGA's website? Okay, so when you go to the portal, it'll show your effort, and you can click here on anyone who is set up to be certified under you. So if you have graduate students, they're going to be set up here. If you're set up as a delegator for someone, it's going to show up here too. And then you can also view your effort report from this area. So this is what it would look like when you go to your effort report and you haven't certified it yet. You're going to have, we don't have any set up, so you can't see all of the red boxes, but you would have all your accounts that you're paid on or effort is set up for you on. They're going to be listed here, and they'll all have red boxes for you to fill in. And then you just click on the certify button and you did it. Does anyone have any questions right now so far about the effort report? Yeah.
I have a couple. On the first page, thank you. On the first page, you said that students would not be listed, but graduate students on projects are listed.
Graduate students, yes.
Then when you were talking about percentages, the way percentages show up for graduate students, they can be doing other things and still listed at 100%.
Graduate students, yes. So graduate students, like if you're saying on sponsored projects,
yes.
If graduate students are 100% on sponsored projects, that's different. We're looking at PIs, faculty, other administrators on sponsored projects. They cannot certify 100% unless they're not spending time doing anything else.
And it would be true also for graduate assistantships that are 100%. 100% of their MSU paid time is what they're certifying. So they're not certifying if they're in, taking classes at MSU. That's not what they're being paid for on their grad assistantship. So if that's a 10-hour-a-week commitment or a 20-hour-a-week commitment, that's what they're certifying for on the effort report.
Thank you for those questions. Does anyone else have any questions right now? So that was going to be my next point, is that effort percentages are based on your total professional effort to MSU. So even if you're only 50% employed at MSU, then you're going to have 100% of that 50% of your time certified on your effort report. The person that is certifying the effort report needs to be comfortable with the percentages that are listed and make sure that they're accurate for that 6-month period. We want to make sure that when you're certifying, you're saying, yeah, this is really the time that I spent working on this project. It's not necessarily what you were paid, it's what you worked on it. Because you can work more on a project than you're actually paid on that project. I wanted to show if you have an account that's not set up yet, what you can do. And there's a spot on the effort report that says add effort on a sponsored project not listed above. So let's say you have this account, but no pays on it yet. And so it's not showing up on your effort report, or we haven't set up effort for it yet. Then Kelly, yeah, you know about this. Yeah. So yeah, what you can do is you can add effort on a sponsored project not listed above, and then you can enter that account number and it will pull into the effort report. Also, sometimes your account doesn't get set up during that effort period, so you can't add an account number yet. But if you add a note down here at the bottom of your effort report, you can put the IP number and what % you worked on that account and add that note. When that cost redistribution comes to our CGA, then they'll see that note and that will be the justification they need to transfer that salary onto the account. So I wanted to show that this 100% always will show up regardless of the amount of time that you work, which we kind of touched on earlier. So even if someone only works like 2 weeks of a semester, so they were employed through 8/1 and they're certifying their effort report for period 2. So that's a period from 7/1 to 12/31. Even though they only worked 1 month out of that time, they're certifying for 100% of that 1 month that they worked. So you might say, well, they were only here a month and they're, it shows that they have 2%, but of their 1 month here, did they work 2%, or did they work for that 1 month all on this account? Because then they could certify 100%, even though it's only for 1 month. And then because MSU doesn't keep time records for faculty, the person who certifies that effort report is the only person who can justify or really say what they worked. We don't keep track of faculty's time. We don't ask them to fill out a timesheet. Can you imagine if we did? Yeah, it's too much. So they're the ones who can really say, yes, this is what I worked on an account. Comfortably, I can say that I spent 50% of my time working on grants and 50% of my time doing other work. The people who can certify accounts. So for faculty or principal investigators, they can certify their own effort reports. Other senior personnel can certify their own. Graduate students, they can't certify their own. So they need to be certified by the PI, co-PI, or faculty advisor. Sometimes you have graduate students who are on multiple accounts. It's not always the same PI, not even always the same department. In those situations, you're going to want communication. Something that we're really good at, right? Communication. So you just need those PIs to communicate with each other and to say, hey, you know what? This person spent about 20% of their time working on my account, and then have the other PI certify for what they worked. Only one person can go in and certify. You can't have 2 PIs go in and certify. So they just have to communicate. And an email is all we need to know, okay, yes, like that's confirmation from this PI saying they spent this much time on their account. Sometimes none of these things are accurate. Sometimes people have retired or left the university, so they cannot go in and certify their own effort report, depending on how long they've been gone. In those situations, you can assign a delegate. You can do a person-to-person delegate, and that will allow that person to go in and certify their effort report. And you can, if you set up a delegate for one period, you can go in and change that for the next period if things change. And then there's instructions hyperlinked here. I'm not going to go to them. They are quite lengthy, but if you ever need to assign a delegate or see a person-to-person delegate list, you can go here and look. Okay, I think I'm going to turn it over to, oh no, I forgot. We're going to talk about recertification. Best thing in the world, recertification. So the way that our effort reports work is you automatically have 14 days after you certify your effort report to go in and recertify. You don't need to request this. You can just go in and there's a button you can click. If you surpass that 14 days, then we do request that you send the below information, and it's listed on our FAQs. But you need to, either in an email or a letter, Let us know the description of all the activities that you perform on your sponsored project, how they benefit the project, how the error occurred, and confirm that you've reviewed the FAQs. When I say you, I mean the person who certified their effort report. And we need to have if they're not the PI in the account, then the PI would need to be copied, and then the chair also has to be copied on this. And this is just an internal control to make sure that, one, people are being consistent in the way that they request to recertify, and also to be sure that they really understand what they're certifying, because that is key when you're certifying an effort report. We want you to know what you're saying, what you're certifying. And we're always here for questions if anyone doesn't understand or isn't comfortable certifying. Stacy and I or anybody who's in our awards group would be happy to help. So now really I'm going to turn it over to Stacy.
Before I start talking about uniform guidance, is there any questions so far or things you want to make sure I touch on as I talk about grant terms? Yeah.
Back 2 slides
Ooh, maybe.
or 1
Let's see.
slide.
Sure can. This one or the previous one?
I think this is it. Let's see. It was, my question is, a delegate or a chair can certify for
Oh, this one.
somebody. What defines suitable means of verification? If a PI has left the university, they're gone, maybe they left under bad circumstances, they're not in communication.
Right. It's typically going to be that person's supervisor that would be able to certify with knowledge enough to say what that person was working on. If no one at the university could say what that person was working on, we wouldn't be able to charge their time to the project
Right.
if we weren't able to get that certification. So if something was really odd and a person left and they had grants and they didn't certify their effort reports before they left and no one knew what that person was doing,
Right.
and no one wanted to certify that effort report, we would be removing that pay from the effort report. So one of the things that is important that we don't always think about because of the timeline is when faculty members are transferring to another institution or leaving MSU, there's a lot going on. One of the things we can think about is there going to be an effort report that needs to be certified? Is someone going to be comfortable certifying that? Or is there a way to make sure that person still has access to the systems? I know sometimes we have adjunct appointments at MSU once people leave, and they can still have access to the systems to be able to certify. So there's a couple different things we can try to do to plan, but I know if someone leaves on not so good terms, then that can definitely be harder to do. Thanks for that question. Uniform guidance. That is our terms and conditions that apply to our federal grants and cooperative agreements, also known as 2 CFR Part 200. You may have heard of it, you may have not. It is what replaced the old OMB circulars, A21 and A110. Regardless of whether or not that means anything to you, what I do want to make clear is that within those terms, we have some revisions that require prior approvals. There are some key revisions to sponsored programs that require prior approvals. One of them being if the PI or key people listed in the award are reducing their effort 25% or more or changing. So if the PI is changing out or a co-PI listed is changing out, either they're leaving or they're being replaced by someone. That's part of what we're looking for on effort reports. So not only are our effort reports a receipt for when we're charging salary, they're also helping us make sure we are in compliance with this term that says, hey, if Dr. Smith told NIH he was going to work 20% on this award, And that's why NIH said, yes, we would love to fund Dr. Smith at MSU because he's going to put 20% of his time towards this award. If he then certifies 5%, we're not in compliance with this term because the government wants to know if we've reduced that person's time 25% or more. And so sometimes we get questions on that because we can get up, but I wasn't paid. So if I wasn't paid, why do I need to certify it? And this is why, when it comes to federal flow through, we treat state like federal flow through. This is what we're looking at. Yeah.
Would you talk a little bit about no-cost extension periods?
Yeah.
I have a whole list of PIs and none of them are expecting to have paid
Yes.
salary during the no-cost extension year.
That
What
is
are
great.
the requirements that they do?
That is a great question. So the question is regarding no cost extension time periods and what's the requirement on effort during no cost extension time periods. We are lucky enough to have two of our big agencies that have clarified this. There are some other agencies that have not though. So I have two answers. Like everything we do, right?
Or six.
Yeah, I have two main answers and then 6 exceptions to the answers, probably. But I'll go over the two main answers. So for NIH and NSF, they have both come out with guidance that says you can reduce your time during a no-cost extension period. For NSF, it's in the FAQs, and for NIH, I am trying to remember if it's in a set of FAQs or not. I do have reference to them. If anyone is curious, I can give you those. So we're happy with that clarification for both of those agencies.
What does reduction mean?
It can mean anything. What it doesn't mean is that someone left and they're gone. But if you've reduced your time, you can reduce it down 10% to 1%. That is an acceptable reduction. They're not limiting how much you can reduce or specifying you have to do at least this. They're saying you can reduce your time. So that to us in our office, what we're looking for is that the person is still comfortable certifying 1% of their time on the project because they're still overseeing it. They're overseeing the closeout. They're doing the final technical report. Whatever it is that they're doing, they're still involved in that project.
Okay, so say that during the no-cost extension, the main PI is probably going to still be spending a lot of time, but the project really can't support salary, so we won't be taking a salary savings for him. And say that one of the co-PIs will continue to like help with data analysis, but the other two really aren't going to be involved anymore, that they will really finish their involvement. So then how do you make the determination by how much the PI expects each of these people will be spending as part of their total time on the project?
It's a good question, and it does get hard to know exactly how to navigate that. What we do ask and suggest is if anyone ever contacts our office, or if you look on our website for what to do when you would like a no-cost extension, that's one of the points that we say to consider. Do we want to communicate with the agency and say so-and-so and so-and-so, PI C and D are done with their piece, so they won't be working during the no-cost extension period? That is good to notify the agency of those things if they are people named in the award document as being part of the project. So then we're letting the agency know that.
Is that required?
That would be changed.
Something like their program officer's approval?
It's
I've already gotten the no-cost extension approved. And
Okay.
so now,
Yeah.
for some reason, effort didn't get covered in that.
Yes. Then, so ideally, we would be able to cover it when we're doing the request. If we do not cover it when we're doing the request, that's when you get follow-up emails from Meghan or awards group saying, this person is named in the award and they're considered a key person. We have to notify the agency if they're no longer participating in the project. And so we would, it's really a prior approval requirement. Just like any of the other prior approval requirements, sometimes it happens after the fact. So why we say prior approval, and prior approval is the goal. If we find out after it's happened, we still should notify the agency so we have that information in our file.
Okay.
Because if we get audited in the future, and we do, we get, in between 30 and 45 audits from our sponsors or third parties looking at our sponsored programs. If they say, hey, this person was in the award, look at this term, 200, 308 in the CFR says if you change key people, you have to get prior approval. Where did you do that?
Okay.
And so that is something that.
Yeah, I don't see that as being an issue with this project, so
Yeah.
we'll just go ahead and do that. I just wanted to know what's the best thing for us to do now, so.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to have a little bit of dialogue so you don't just have to listen to Megan and I talk about terms and conditions, and we can hear some real live examples. So I touched briefly on one of the reasons that we're doing things is because of audits. I do want, this is an example that we've had around for a couple of years because it's a big example and a good example. $9 million for false claim settlement due to effort reports not being certified in what the auditors could tell was a correct and proper method. They noticed that principal investigators would certify large batches of reports without really knowing what they were certifying. And so I know we joke around a little bit at MSU that, sometimes faculty really don't understand effort reports and they don't know what they're certifying or something, but we really do want to get anyone who's certifying an effort report as comfortable as possible, because that can be really bad if we have an auditor here and they're talking with a faculty member and a faculty member says, I don't understand effort reports. That's potentially going down this lane of people are certifying or agreeing to something and they don't really understand it. So we do want to, whenever possible, we're available to talk to PIs, we're available to come out to department meetings, and we're also looking for input. If there is something we can do, it's a homegrown system that we have at MSU. If we can do things to make it easier, to make things more understandable. Now, we can't just get rid of it. That's not one of the options. We have to have something to back up the pay on projects, but we do look for feedback. Do you have a?
Well, and I was just going to say, I had a chance to talk to somebody from Columbia who does their effort reporting system, and because of this audit finding, they have had to become so strict. And we are so lucky here at MSU because we do have recertification allowability, and we get a lot of time to get our effort reports done. They don't allow that. They don't allow for recertification at all. If you do it incorrectly, your pay is removed and it's not allowed back onto your account. And they have 6 weeks. 6 weeks to complete their effort reports. So we're lucky.
Yeah, we want to stay lucky.
Yeah.
And so that would mean hopefully no audit findings for MSU, and then everyone will be happier. The other thing on the bottom here is something that we touched on already. So they found that people were charging federal grants for time that they spent doing things that weren't related to that federal grant. So the example they have on here is such as competitive grant proposal writing. So that would be writing a new proposal. Say you're 100% on grants and you're writing new proposals. Well, since you're 100% on grants, that means you have 0% to do anything else. And unfortunately, the answer can't be, well, that's what I did on Saturday, and Saturday is a non-MSU day. No, it's, anything you're doing for MSU is counted towards that appointment that you have at MSU. So some of this are things we already talked about, but we wanted to put other useful notes. So if you go back to this later, you can check it out, and I'll touch on some of the things that maybe we haven't talked about yet. So I think I did say that salary is the largest expense that we have on our RC accounts. So for those of you who have processed other documentation for expenses on RC accounts, maybe you do DVs or different things in KFS, you know that the items that you're charging to projects, they have receipts or they have some sort of paper trail. You might have P cards, you might have travel reimbursement, and they all require something to get it charged to the project. So really to do an effort report to support salary, we hope it's not seen as too horribly burdensome. And we're trying to cover a large period, 6 months, so we don't have to do them super frequently. I know that sometimes 6 months can also seem like a long period of time, and how do I gauge how I really spent my time over 6 months? So we're trying to get the best of both worlds, where we're not making certifications due too frequently to where you're always doing paperwork, but hopefully manageable. Biweekly pay can cross effort periods. Anyone who's looked at maybe a grad student's effort report and been confused by why, they switched their appointment January 1st, why am I getting a little bit of something on this period, is because we have to go by pay periods when we're pulling in pay. So this example that's circled in the red, you can see that our monthly pay period we're able to say is 1/1 to 6/30. But the biweekly, we have to look at where the pay period is. And so we pull what is closest to that 6 months, but you're going to have, on this one, you're going to have a couple days in July on this effort period, where if you're a monthly salaried person, it cuts off June 30. So it's something to keep in mind if people are changing appointments and their pay reflects something that changed. That sounds confusing, just hearing myself say it. So if you ever have any questions on that, let us know. We mainly want to just point that out as something to consider. When we set up effort, it's going to include both mandatory and voluntary cost share. We get questions on this sometimes where, why would I need to certify 20%? I wasn't paid 20%. I kind of talked about that a few minutes ago on when we're looking at the UG and setting up effort. So we're going to set up, like Megan mentioned, whatever was in the budget, whatever the PI or co-PI said they would work on the project. And if they happen to not pay themselves, that effort percent still shows on the report as voluntary uncommitted cost share. So that's where the voluntary part comes in. And then we're also setting up mandatory. So if you say, of my 20% that I'm going to put forward, I'm going to charge 10% to the sponsor, and MSU is going to cost share 10%. We're going to have 20% total, and 10% would be considered mandatory because we let the sponsor know that we were going to cover it. The percentages are hyperlinked. If you haven't noticed that in the past, it's really cool. Hopefully it's something that you guys all are aware of. So anything that's underlined is hyperlinked. And if you click there, you can see the pay period end date, when it was posted, and the percent paid on account. Sometimes there's a lot of information if there's been a lot of different SAP appointments processed or a lot of adding and removing. It can get a little busy, but it's a nice way to see where things came from and why it's adding up to a certain percent. Megan touched on the 14 days to recertify. This is the button. It's at the bottom of the report. It's visible for 14 days. If it's no longer visible and something that can be clicked on, then that means we have to go through the other method of recertifying, which is contacting our office. Something that several colleges have their own policies on this, but it is something that we stress as well. If you're an AY employee and you receive 3 full months of summer pay on sponsored projects, that means absolutely no vacations. Because if you're taking vacation during the summer while you're paid 3 full summer months, that means one of your sponsored projects is paying for your vacation time. That would be really bad. we don't want to see that. It used to be, gosh, I didn't tell you guys how long I've been around. I've been in contracts and grants 14 years. And I remember when I started 14 years ago, and for a few years after that, people would have to certify. If they got paid over 2.5 months, they would have to fill out paperwork saying that they're not doing anything else over the summer. So that official central form is gone, but I think some of the colleges do some items that are similar to that to make sure that we're being careful there.
Our college only allows 2.5.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is just a link to our overview and FAQs. We have a pretty extensive collection of FAQs that we've come up with since before I started. Many of you are probably familiar with Sharon Hibbard. She was our effort admin for over 20 years, and she recently retired. Meghan took over, and she's doing great. It was big shoes to fill. But Sharon helped collect all those FAQs, and we have a lot of information for what we're the types of questions that we get. We want to show you the org chart for contracts and grants. The awards group on the far left is where Meghan and I are, and then the other groups in our office. We're separated by functional tasks, and so again, the awards group is dealing with setting up that effort, extending that effort, dealing with prior approvals if we want to reduce that effort or change PIs. So you might hear from one of us or anyone in that group. As with anything for post-award, if you have a question, you can really contact anyone in our office and we'll direct you to the right person or see it through till the end to make sure you get your questions answered. Switching a little bit from effort into matching and cost share. Effort can also be cost share, so not switching topics totally, but moving on to matching now. Anything that we want to talk about effort report related before I start talking about matching and cost share? Yeah.
The only real nightmare scenario with the effort reports that I've come across is working with professors that are academic year status. They're way over the salary cap and they got a lot of federal grants and they want to fund as much of their summer as they possibly can. There is a summer salary cap. If they choose to exceed the summer salary cap, figuring that now the effort reports are in discrete 6 month blocks. So that effort is going to be prorated over that time. It kind of gets, lost in the wash, so to speak. Does sponsored programs have a policy on that?
Yeah, we do look at that. Thank you for that question. Salary cap in the summer comes up, I don't want to say frequently, but it is something that is hard to navigate. I also want to say I appreciate that you said your one problem with effort. That means everything else is going really smoothly and works well. So that's really good to hear. So for summer pay, it can be really hard because some faculty can't receive summer pay unless it's on a sponsored program because there's not unrestricted funding to pay that faculty member. And if they're over the salary cap, what does that mean? Because they don't have matching unsponsored funds to pay for that amount that's over the cap. So far, what MSU's stance and our office's stance is if you're going to be paid on an NIH project or something with a salary cap over the summer, you have to have unrestricted funds to pay for the amount over the cap. That is the only way MSU is able to do it at this point, unless there's some change in the HR system where a faculty member can elect to take a lower pay. But really, since our system's set up the way it is, if someone is being paid for 1 month of their summer, it's paid at their institutional rate. And if their institutional rate is higher than the salary cap, then it has to be prorated when they're paid on an NIH project. So if the salary cap is 80% of what someone's paid, then only 80% of their pay could go to that project, and then the other 20% would have to go to unrestricted. And that's by, it really is by day, by month. We're not able to average out over the whole 6 months, because if you drill down into it and you say, well, in July, I worked 100% on my NIH project, and I took my full salary from the NIH project, an auditor can go back and see you took 100% of your salary and it was over the cap. Whatever is over the cap is not allowed. It's not that you can average it all out and say, well, but during the academic year, I had teaching and random stuff, and so I didn't charge, as much, and so it all averages out. We want to make sure all our internal documentation is going to make sense.
If they take that 100% as 100% of the capped amount, then they're okay.
To my knowledge, that hasn't been possible.
Well, let's say their summer salary is $50,000 for 3 months. The cap is $30,000 or something like that. They take 100% of the $30,000.
The way that is going to look in SAP, though, is not what we're saying, I don't think. So if they're going to be paid, they're getting paid off of their institutional-based salary. As far as I know, HR does not allow someone to elect to take a, hey, I'm going to be paid this week in the summer, but only pay me 70% of my salary. We can talk a little bit more about it. I know it's come up in the past and we didn't have a good answer. So if there is a good answer, I am very happy to discuss that further. Thank you. Okay. Matching and cost share, moving on to that. So for matching, also known as cost share, this is the portion of the project that MSU is going to cover. It might also be covered by a third party, but usually what we're referring to is the part that MSU is going to cover when people are asking us about matching or cost share or how to track it. So there's a couple different types of this. Mandatory is going to be required by the sponsor. So in the request for proposal, it's going to say, in order for MSU to be eligible for this, you have to provide a 1-to-1 match, or you have to provide a 10% match, or it'll tell you what you need to do in order to be eligible for the award. That's considered mandatory. Now the 2 voluntary ones, we're going to really stress that you not commit voluntary cost share. OSP will tell you, please don't do that if you're routing a proposal through OSP with voluntary cost share, because once we submit voluntary cost share and that proposal gets funded, it now becomes mandatory, because we told the sponsor, hey, if you give MSU this money, we will, also share by giving $50,000 in salary or supplies or whatever we want to give to make it sound really good. Then when they fund us, we can't say, oh, well, you didn't say I really had to do that. Because they funded our award based on what we said. And so we have to, we have an agreement to do that. So that's why we'd rather not have any voluntary cost share. Some of our agencies have even moved towards really discouraging that. Like NSF doesn't allow cost share, and they want it to be even playing field for all the colleges, and they've recognized that bigger universities can cost share easier, and so they don't even allow cost share in most of their applications. It has to specifically say cost share in order for NSF to allow that in. So the committed is when we're saying we're going to do it, and then the voluntary uncommitted is what ends up happening if we say that a PI is going to spend 10% of their time on a project and charge that 10%, but then they don't actually charge it to the project. Then we end up with some uncommitted stuff that ends up being cost share because we didn't, the sponsor didn't pay for it, but we have to have that effort on the project. So now there's some additional cost share. So what's going to show up in our AE screen here is the required cost share. So this is going to be if it's in the award document, part of the RFP, or we voluntarily said, hey, if you fund MSU, we're going to chip in $19,828. I don't think that's what happened here. That must be salary and fringe or something. It's an odd number. But that's what we're going to put there, and it's going to show up as yes being required. You will see this in your notification of award when it comes out, when your account's first set up. That email tells you how much cost share is required. And if you ever have any questions about where that number came from, definitely reach out to CGA, and you will work with our reports or cash management group typically to make sure we have what we need to report on that cost share. People will generally use salaries to document cost share because it's the easiest way. It's also where most of our expenses are. It doesn't mean you can't cost share other things. If you are going to cost share something else like supplies or travel and they're on a general fund or another unrestricted fund, our financial groups are going to ask that the operating statement for the account that the cost shared expenses are on gets submitted with the expenses circular highlighted saying these went towards my NIH project, and the PI is going to have to certify that those are accurate expenses for his or her federal or whatever project that they have this required cost share on. Something to note is cost shared expenses have to be allowable same way as direct charge expenses. So, if meals, if the meals aren't an allowable cost on your project, then you can't cost share those meals. If something like equipment's not going to be allowed as an allowable cost, we would still need to get sponsor approval to charge something like that as cost share and count it as cost share. One of the things that can be counted as cost share is unrecovered indirect, but we do need to include that in our application, proposal application, or get approval for that from the agency. So that is a good way if we do have to reduce our indirects because the agency mandated it or because we don't have enough available funding to do the project. Counting that unrecovered indirect is a good way to meet obligations. And we can't cost share a federal project onto another federal project. So keep that in mind as well. We do have a cost share summary report on our website. It's available on the reports and statistics page, and it's also available on each account. You can get to it, and it will show you what has been certified to date and what this totals. So it gives you the salary, fringe, and overhead of what has already been certified. There's a drop down where you can pick how you want it to sort and what effort periods you want to pull in, and you can pull in all effort periods as well. So it's a way to help you manage your cost share if it's on salaried, if the cost share is based on salary. And it's under the effort tab if you're in AE. And I think, yeah, that is, that's it. I have to give credit to Megan for doing the PowerPoint and some of the animations that were fun. That was Megan. And do you guys have any additional questions, or are there questions that came from the Zoom participants or anything like that?
For the cost share there, if it didn't get tracked by CGA, you've just kind of been keeping track in your own department.
Yeah.
Should you at some point get those operating statements or labor distributions and highlight this was part of cost share?
Yeah, so what we look for is we do have to have a certification statement at that point from the PI to say what was allowable project costs. And then we say that all the backup can be retained in the department. So if there's additional things that go along with those operating statements, say you have the travel, the DVs and the different worksheets from the travel. You don't need to send all of those to us, but if they help show how they supported that project, say your travel reimbursement worksheet says that it was a conference that was related to this project, that's good documentation for you to keep at the department level in case it is ever selected. But for what we're looking at and what we need to report it on our financial reports is to know the total from you, and that's typically the ledger with the highlighted or circled, and then the PI certifying that yes, those are the expenses that went towards the project that needed the cost share. Did you have?
Yeah, and I was just going to say, and you should be getting questions from the reports group or cash management group, either at the end of your project, if you have required cost share, they should be asking for that documentation, or even as we're invoicing, so in the reports group, as we're sending out invoices, if we notice that your cost share isn't being met, and you're like almost done with your project, we're gonna say, hey, what's going on? And so they should be requesting that documentation from you so that you're not just blindsided at the end. Yeah, we have a question in the back.
Can you explain if you have mandatory cost share and it's being funded by a third party outside of MSU, what all you need?
Yeah, so this comes up, there's a couple different ways for third-party cost share to be accounted for. Sometimes we get the money from the third party, and then that on its own is another sponsored project. So in that scenario, it gets run through the system just like a sponsored project, and then we also can count it towards the cost share. So this wouldn't be federal to federal, but an example that I think I ran into was we had a USDA project and then some money from John Deere that was matching. And so what happens is both of those get set up in RC accounts. And then we make notes on in this scenario, the John Deere funding to say this is also being counted for as match on this other USDA project. So all expenses have to also be allowable to that USDA project for it to be counted as match. So in that situation, it sounds like it could be confusing, but I think we have a way to manage that and set it up in our system. Now, if we have a third party that is contributing cost share or something, but they're not giving us the money, then that is going to be a different scenario. So it's almost like a subcontract to someone who is going to be involved in cost sharing. Hopefully they're also involved in other ways, because that's a interesting subcontract with someone. If it's only cost sharing, we would still have to get documentation from them to show that they spent X amount of money or contributed, X amount to a project. Any additional kind of?
There's probably too many details.
We can talk about it
We
later.
can definitely, we can talk about it. Thank you.
This is kind of dawning on me now as you're talking. This
Uh-oh.
is kind of unsettling because,
Oh, no.
well, you have somebody who's over the salary cap. And let's say that the cap is only 70% of their salary. So they're getting paid for $70,000 of effort. You better be able to verify an additional $30,000 of cost share. So if they're funding their summers, you're not going to see that because you don't cost share during the summer.
But it does. It still pulls into the effort report, their pay. And when we go in, and because we actually set up the salary cap,
Okay.
so we're setting it up based on what they have been actual pay on their effort report. So it's going to pull in, it'll pull in the first 1.5 months of summer into that effort period. And we're taking that entirety of the pay. So whatever much they're over, that's what we're going to base our calculation of what needs to be cost shared in order to cover for the salary cap.
Okay. Then that's that hurdle. The other hurdle would be if an auditor was a real bean counter and they really wanted to look at it granularly, then they might say, well, he worked during the summer. He got $10,000 of pay during the summer for, 10% effort or whatever. They better be able to see
And they can.
the other funding for the portion of that salary.
On the bottom of everyone's effort report, it actually will state for this account, for this much pay, this much is for salary cap. So
Yeah.
they'll be able to see for each effort period what they have had cover for their salary account for each account. So it should show on there. There's no one that could be, because we go through and we run a report and we do it after the pay has already hit the account. It's not done prior to, it's always done after the pay has hit the account.
Megan manually looks at.
Every single one. It's really fun.
Poor girl.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're setting it up based on actual pay.
I get what you're saying, and I think there's,
It's technically anybody who is over the cap and has taken summer on a federal grant. At any point,
to have.
technically there needs to be another funding source that manifests that
Yes.
portion beyond the cap.
That's the answer we always give.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh man.
Any final questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.